Hi, it's Tom Jordan. We've got a huge warning to the United States from a well known Canadian columnist who says, "We are next. The irreversible devastation in that country is coming here unless we change course fast." That's in a few. But first, I want to just follow up on the breaking news out west. This is horrendous. These wildfires occurring in California in the Los Angeles area. They're ravaging Los Angeles County, leaving 5 people dead at this moment. It could be more than that. We have about 27,000 acres that have been scorched and pretty much zero containment on these fires. And there's the Eaton fire. That's one that remains uncontained as well. That's claiming lives. The Palisades fire threatens thousands of homes. A lot of celebrity home and residents live in the Pacific Palisades area. Thousands of homes are being threatened right now. Hundreds have been destroyed. And it's really amazing how quickly these flames are moving. You can see some of the footage here. Despite some progress on the Sunset Fire, that's the one near Hollywood Hills. Listen, mismanagement and neglected prevention efforts have been fueling this growing criticism of California leadership. And I know this has been the case for about 15, 20 years out in California, the seemingly purposeful effort to allow all the dry brush to go unabated. And I've covered many of these similar types of fires out in Southern California, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, the mountain communities, San Diego. And it is a well-stated fact that the reason why these fires go up is because California, most people don't realize, is a semi-desert. It's a very dry place. And you get your rains in the spring, and then the brush grows up, and then it gets real dry in the summer, and then the brush dries out like bone dry. And then the Santa Ana winds typically pick up in September and October. There's been many Januaries where these Santa Ana winds kick up. We're talking about 70, 80 mile per hour winds. I have a birthday in January. I've celebrated many a birthday growing up out there in Santa Ana conditions. And so that's not the issue. The issue nowadays is that they've decided to completely mismanage the terrain out there. And it's incredibly dangerous. And the more people that have moved out there and they built these multi-million-dollar homes, those fires have become more and more devastating. When you look at the property damage that has occurred. Now you can see these 5 different fires out in the Los Angeles area, and probably the most structural damage has been maybe in that Palisades fire just because of the celebrity homes that are out there. The smoke, it's just tremendous. So the Palisades fire has exposed pretty much a lot of cracks in not only California's leadership, and I'm going to get into that later in the broadcast about what Trump said yesterday about Gavin Newsom, and Gavin Newsom pushed back as if it wasn't the case. It is absolutely the case. Donald Trump was telling the truth about what Gavin Newsom has been doing. The fire hydrants are dry out there. They've used up all the water that's been available to fight these fires with 0% containment. Something has been very wrong in California for many different years, and as if they care more about a fish out there called the smelt than they do people. And it's infuriating for people who have watched this happen and the deceit from these politicians in order to claim that this is climate change that is causing these fires. That's not it at all. In fact, climate experts say, no, the fires have pretty much stayed the same. The damage has gotten worse. And the reason why, well, the conditions have stayed the same. The reason why more fires are popping up to this degree is, as I've already stated, the mismanagement out there. So a lot of cracks, not only in California, but also in the Los Angeles leadership. A lot of celebrities now coming out, these stars and residents together, criticizing the city's response to this wildfire that has decimated over 1,000 homes. And these Santa Ana winds, they're not to be trifled with. They are dangerous. But the fire grew rapidly from 200 acres to nearly 3,000 within just a few hours. That's how quickly these fires spread. And you got gridlocked streets. You got chaos all over that place that's been left in its wake. So you have some very liberal actors and actresses now coming out and saying this was mismanaged, and they're saying it now because these are the consequences of some of these very far-left liberal policies. Politics affects our lives, and this is one example of how bad policies do just that. So actress Sarah Michelle Gellar, she blasted the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, on social media. And she was highlighting the lack of traffic management during the evacuations, like this complete gridlock. There wasn't one traffic cop out there, she says. She posted this on social media. She tagged some of these city officials. Professional dancer Valentin Shmerkovitsky called out California's third world infrastructure, despite sky-high taxes. Yeah, what are they using that money for? And he said that fire hydrants are dry. Firefighters lacked water pressure. Unbelievable. It's not the firefighters' fault here. It's the city management and the California management. People are fuming out there. And then Jillian Michaels, she's the celebrity, fitness guru kind of thing. Sarah Foster is another celebrity. They shared their frustrations over the budget cuts and the neglected fire prevention efforts, what I just talked about. Governor Gavin Newsom, they're pointing fingers at the governor. It's not just Donald Trump. He gets the headlines, but all these residents out there who have been watching this for years are pointing right at Gavin Newsom for this and Mayor Karen Bass, because the reservoirs have been emptied to save a fish, while our fire department's budget was slashed as well. That's what Foster wrote about this. So the water issue, what they do out there, if you're not aware of this, so they get all this water that comes down from the Sierra and the snow melt, and it's wonderful. It's supposed to provide water for both northern and southern California. What these politicians have done is they diverted a huge chunk of that water that, they keep saying, oh, there's a drought in California. Well, they're diverting that water to the Pacific Ocean. They're sending it out to sea, getting rid of all the water, fresh water. Why? Because there's something called a smelt. It's a fish, and they're concerned about its survival. It's near extinction, so they're trying to prevent the smelt from going extinct. They care more about fish than people out there. Actor Steve Guttenberg, he was a good Samaritan. If you didn't hear about what he did, he was moving these abandoned cars to clear pathways for the firefighters to come out. But he described the Palisades as a ghost town now, and he criticized the lack of emergency planning. They know this is coming. They knew it was, and they don't prepare properly for it. So residents are mourning the devastating losses. Spencer Pratt, Sandra Lee, other celebrities are calling for accountability. And they're arguing that mismanagement, not climate change, is fueling these disasters. And too many people are buying into this narrative that because of climate change, there's a drought. Now, have you heard that Mayor Gavin Newsom is diverting fresh water out to the sea? So that is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's going to be a drought this year. Now, it is dry. These are dry conditions. But why not use every drop of water you can to make it easier for the millions of people who live there, particularly in Southern California? So you got the lack of traffic management. These evacuations have been horrendous. When Sarah Michelle Gellar criticized the city's failure to deploy traffic cops, now I don't know completely how accurate that is, but she didn't see any. So that's from her perspective. And they're calling for evacuations, but there's no one to direct traffic. So there's gridlock out there. Lives are being endangered from that alone. You got that insufficient water supply for the firefighters, lambasting the city for all the fire hydrants that are dry, the low water pressure. It just undermines the firefighters' ability to combat this blaze. And there's all sorts of just neglected fire prevention efforts that we spoke about. But the budget cuts were pretty severe. Do you know that Los Angeles, they cut their firefighting budget. I think it's down to, I think they slashed it by $17 million. They cut the fire department's budget to, I think now it's like $700 million a year. But they raised their homelessness budget to over $1 billion. I think it's like $1.2 billion to give money out to homeless. Now, there's a homeless problem for sure, but the programs that they're using to combat homelessness are not working. So anyway, emptying reservoirs to save fish, prioritizing that over public safety, and preparing for these fires that come every single year. We know that's going to happen this next year and the year after that and the year after that. You've got to manage this better. So it's unfortunate. We'll get into some of the other criticism from Donald Trump and get into more of the policies that affected this. Coming up in just a bit. But first, I do want to talk about what's happening up north in Canada. Take heed, America. Look to the north to see what's in store for the United States, unless we dramatically shift course. That man right there, Justin Trudeau, stepping down from the Liberal Party, which means he's going to be leaving as Prime Minister very, very shortly as well. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, of course, stepping down as the Liberal Party leader. He'll soon exit as Prime Minister, but the damage to that country under his watch, much of it is irreversible. So in a moment, I'm going to speak with a journalist in the great Canadian city of Toronto who has written a column warning America of the policies that will do the same to our country. We're following Canada. A lot of liberals say, hey, we should look to Canada as an example of how the United States should be. No, we should not. Because Justin Trudeau exits the stage as this symbol of these failed promises and this political hubris that's out there that's really, in fact, in reality, left Canada with soaring costs, rising crime, and the fallout of unchecked migration. Why? Because progressive ideals destroy, as they were meant to, a society. So Trudeau's legacy includes this housing crisis that he's seen under his watch, a strained healthcare system, which was already bad in Canada, and a fractured nation. The carbon tax and immigration policies that he put into place had alienated ordinary Canadians struggling to make ends meet. While his response to the trucker convoy, remember that? It exposed his government, which is veering into authoritarianism. And he froze their bank accounts. And anyone who donated to the truckers' cause, that man, went into your personal banking account and froze your personal funds because he didn't like where your money was going to. It wasn't illegal. It was just something that he could do, so he did it. So that's authoritarianism. And a lot of Democrats here in the United States supported him because he's a liberal. And he's a progressive, and he's under the sway, you might say, of the World Economic Forum, just like so many American Democrats are. So Justin Trudeau's obsession with identity politics, his lofty globalist rhetoric, which again came out of the World Economic Forum, rather than the bread and butter issues Canadians face, only deepen the destruction in that country. So we're going to focus on a major contributor to Canada's demise, its mass migration, using its temporary resident permit program, basically what the U.S. calls the H-1B visa program. So the H-1B visa debate in the United States is similar to Canada's failed temporary resident permit program, and it highlights how these systems undermine domestic workers and they're burdening middle-class taxpayers and families. Laura Rosen Cohen is my guest. That's just a few seconds away. Before we get to her, a reminder to chime in. I'd love to have your comments, your questions today. I want to engage with you. Just put them in the comments section of wherever you're watching, whether it's Facebook or X or on YouTube. I'll get to those in just a moment. And really the best way you can help Tom Jordan Live is simply to subscribe for free on the podcast and click the notification bell and save the content, please, if you could. That'd be wonderful. Thank you. All right, another just brief update on the Canadian crisis. The immigration failures are really the blueprint that America needs to rewrite the script here fast, very quickly. A mid-level software engineer losing his job to an H-1B worker hired at half the salary, only to find the same worker later applying for government assistance, watching the system reward cheap labor over loyalty, left that American worker questioning the priorities of his own country. That's been playing out by the thousands, the tens of thousands in the United States. And the U.S. would be wise to look north as a harbinger of things to possibly come if we don't learn the lessons of Justin Trudeau. You know, a major reason his favorability ratings plummeted was the economy and low pay and high cost of living, and his prioritizing Canada's temporary resident permit program. It's the same thing as what the U.S. calls the H-1B visa program. And they call it the TRP in Canada. It's the temporary resident program. It's become this backdoor for immigration abuse. 10% now of the population is now classified as temporary. 10% of Canada's population is now classified as temporary, but they're not leaving. It's not temporary. In the H-1B visa program in the United States, it basically mirrors this. Many of the TRP's failures is displacing domestic workers with cheaper foreign labor and birth tourism, supported by these loopholes in the visa systems, places this unsustainable burden on public health care and education. The lack of the enforcement of the temporary visa programs allows the participants to overstay, and they're avoiding legal accountability because no one's really watching this. And we're going to talk about birthright citizenship as well in the United States. Canada incentivizes it in this exploitation, essentially, and exacerbates the taxpayer funded resource strain. So, my guest today believes that America, the United States, must learn from Canada's failures by enforcing limits, holding abusers accountable, and prioritizing its own citizens in policy decisions. Here's my conversation earlier with Laura Rosen Cohen. Laura Rosen Cohen is a Toronto writer. Her work has been featured in the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, National Post, the Jerusalem Post, the Jerusalem Report, the Canadian Jewish News, and Newsweek, among others. She's a very, very busy individual. In addition to all of that, she is a special needs parent. She's also a columnist. And this is one of my favorite aspects of her. She is the official in-house Jewish mother of internationally best-selling author and one of my favorite talk show hosts, Mark Steyn at steinonline.com. Of course, Steyn, if you know Mark Steyn, is spelled Steyn, steinonline.com. Laura, it's so nice to have you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So you wrote about this, what we're calling the H-1B visa program here in the United States and the pushback against it. You're in Canada. You're in Toronto right now. You've written about the problems that program in Canada has seen under Justin Trudeau, who has now stepped down as the Liberal Party's leader and what's likely going to be ending his stint, his
Yay.
long stint. Applaud everyone around the room
Thank
as
you,
the Prime
God.
Minister
Yeah.
of Canada, probably pretty soon. But can
Yeah,
you, and it's on the Brownstone Institute, your latest column, which I love
that's
that
right.
organization. Can you address the problems that you've seen, the struggles, the inflationary and the tax increasing effects of the program in Canada, and why you're writing this as a warning to Americans as it relates to H-1B?
So where to start? I mean, you mentioned Trudeau is exiting. That is a good place to start. He's actually only resigned as the leader of the Liberal Party. And in doing so, he's granted the Liberals a little bit of a chance to get organized and pick a new leader sort of well before a new election is going to be had. So it's kind of like a final screw you to Canadians on his way out the door. It's nothing selfless about it. But the disaster that he has created in this country is extensive. And even when he leaves, even if the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, gets in, I'm not really too optimistic about what the recovery is going to be. And this is largely because the demographics in Canada have changed so dramatically over the course of the Trudeau years. And that is the result of the importation of many, many, many illegal and legal immigrants and migrants and refugees and that sort of thing, getting to the point where we have a population of it's relatively close to 10% temporary residents in this country of 40 million people. And there's no exit plan for people who are temporary resident permit holders to actually exit and do what they're supposed to do in being temporary. So, what that has done is really destroyed a lot of the fabric of Canada. The socialized medical system, it already is stretched beyond belief, completely deteriorated. Urban centers in Canada are not just overwhelmed with encampments, a lot of crime, the public transportation system full of crime, and the importation of people who are willing to work for very low wages, which displaces sort of the middle class here. This has been done in corporation and in conjunction with corporate Canada. As well, a very belligerent number of people coming here from countries that are not friendly to the values of the Western world.
Mm.
And those demographics are very impactful because those people have a much more upward birth rate. So there is kind of a population shift just in terms of the religious composition of Canada as well. So on every level, housing prices have gone up, even though Canada is a huge country with lots of land. So there's really there's no element of Canada that has been untouched by these policies, and temporary government policies always end up being permanent. So I think that there is something to be learned from Canada for America, and it's that these temporary worker permits most often become a permanent thing, and it most often really displaces people who are native born, especially the working middle class. It's going to evolve so that it's going to be the white collar workers who are affected the most as well if H-1B policies continue to be aggressively accepted and pursued by tech companies in America.
Yeah, it's amazing to me because I look to Canada, and the same thing that we see starting to happen here has been happening. And I mean, Canada, the healthcare system 20, 30 years ago was already, as you said, stretched so incredibly thin, and people don't recognize they think Canada has this wonderful system because everybody has healthcare. Well, yeah, you got to wait 9 months too to get into a doctor. Now it's to the point where it is at a crisis level. And so what bewilders me is that we have all these case studies from our perspective here in the States, and I'm not far from you
Mm-hmm.
actually. I've
Yeah.
worked for years right along the Detroit River, which on the other side of that is Canada. But we still don't have a good grasp of what it's really like there because we're not getting the story because it seems to be suppressed to some degree as well. But there's a great case study in Canada. There's a great one in Germany. There's a great one in Italy. There's a great one in France right now. Everyone's doing the same thing. That somehow there's an effort, it seems, to get rid of Western society by allowing the greatest, I would think the most effective way to do this is to bring potentially millions and millions of foreigners into our country who do not align with Western values in order to strip away, and they're not going to assimilate into this. So it's fascinating to me that that's what's been happening in Canada. So your situation there, we have the H-1B visa program. In Canada, you call it the temporary resident permit program, which you've just explained is not temporary at all. So you're saying it's about 10% right now of the population
Close,
is
like 7.5%, maybe something like that. But we're getting close to 10%, which is the point at which policies shift to the 10%. Public policy gets dragged to that 10%, whether it's boomers or whatever. So we're getting very close to that point.
so just to say how like much of a crisis this is, because you also said something there in your first answer that the people in that 10% have a much higher birth rate than the current citizens of Canada, and that's certainly the case here in the United States. I think in this country we have like 1.7 children being born per woman in
Right.
this country. And if you look, if they're coming from Pakistan or from Mexico or wherever they're coming from, that goes, I don't know if it's 4, 5, or 6, what exactly it
Right.
is, but it's much. So that 10% will soon become 20, 30, 70%.
Yeah, quite easily. I mean, demographics, Mark Stein says demographics are destiny, and obviously that's true. The future of these countries is for the people who are showing up and who are having babies. And if you don't have babies, then you don't have a population, and you don't really have a future. So it's kind of hard to complain about the direction that the West is going in when people are not getting married, not having children, or countries that just have barely have a replacement demographic rate. And just to clarify, the immigration of populations, let's say from Muslim countries where the birth rate is significantly high, those are not refugees for the most part. Those are actually, a lot of them are legal immigrants. And the in the West here, we're trying to pretend that diversity is great and that all cultures are equal when that clearly isn't true. Western civilization equals civilization. And when you import large numbers of people who don't subscribe to Western values, who even are, their values are antithetical to Western values, there's going to be a clash of civilizations. And we're seeing that play out in many places. I think that, after October 7th in Israel, we saw that really clearly, and it was hard for
Mhm.
people to look away from that. And that's going to keep on happening. So I think that there is a bit of a backlash right now. But the question is, even when conservatives or Republicans get into office, the demographics are where the rubber hits the road. And the issue that I think, well, I'm going to be looking at, and maybe other Western civilizations are going to be looking at, like in Europe, is will President Trump have the fortitude, the
Mhm.
testicular fortitude to actually deport hundreds of thousands and perhaps millions of people in order to set the demographics in the right direction?
Yeah,
That's a big
if Donald
question.
Trump doesn't have that fortitude as you described it, I don't think anybody does, because what he's
Right.
shown that he's able to withstand over the past many, many years now,
Yeah.
the onslaught, the tidal wave of people really trying to destroy not just his
And kill
power but
him.
his life, and to
Yeah,
kill him. Yeah,
exactly.
to take him
Yeah.
out is like he's standing. And I think so. I think he's
Something
pretty
else.
motivated
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
this, and I think to be an example to Europe and to help them in their cause too. Because what happens
Yeah.
there happens here, happens in North America, and I just you think about this. There's a problem and there's a crisis happening in both of our countries right now that isn't often talked about, but it is at crisis levels. We're talking about trafficking, human trafficking, child
Right.
trafficking. We're talking about drug
Yeah.
trafficking in both of our countries. These diploma mills, which are really kind of a front, as you
Hmm.
write about
Yeah.
in your piece, for there is it's under the guise of education, under the guise of employment, when in
Right.
fact there are major abuses happening right under our
Absolutely.
noses. So,
Yeah.
how bad is it in Canada, and what can we
It's
do in America, do you think,
it's
based on your
really
experience,
bad in
to
Canada.
stop
It's
that?
really bad here. It's a lot of, many, many, many um, fake like diploma mill colleges in strip malls, that are post office boxes. And the main wave now is from India. And, there are cities in Canada, here in Ontario, where you really, it does look like sort of like Bombay or Mumbai or whatever, and full of a population that is, it's no longer like identifiably Canadian. So it's very bad. And like I said in my piece, there's also like corporate collaboration to have workers that will work for less wages and fewer benefits. So that's where we're at here. Uh, I don't see any. I have not seen anything of a public policy, which is an exit plan for getting some of these people to go back to the countries that they came from. Really
Mm.
nothing. So this is going to be a major challenge for any incoming government, even if it's a majority conservative government. It's going to be a real uphill
Oh
battle.
yeah, it's so difficult once they're in to get them out
Yeah.
effectively. And listen, when we talk about diversity, what we're not talking about diversity of skin color. We're talking about diversity of
Right.
thought. And the root word of diversity is what? It's division. It means divided. And we don't want division, and divisiveness is not our strength, like a lot of people
Mm.
like to claim. And it's not racist here to say, listen, we want, in your place, it'd be Canadian first policies for the citizens of your country.
Right.
So when you look at that, we would prefer America first policies in terms of
Right.
employment. So Elon Musk comes in and
Hmm.
Vivek Ramaswamy come in and say, we need to expand these programs. Here be the
Right.
H-1B. We need to expand it because we just simply don't have the talent pipeline that we need. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that's incorrect. I mean, America is a country with a huge population already, extremely talented. So much innovation comes from America, and it's so important to develop that. So I think that we have a crisis, not of talent, but it's a crisis of confidence. And there's other things to look at in America, the public school system, all the woke and DEI policies that have been so radically integrated into every facet of American life and have become the most dangerous export that America has ever exported to the world. So, people who are industry leaders and entrepreneurs have benefited from the H-1B program. And so it's not like anybody's looking at it objectively if they have like a business interest or somebody in their family who's benefited from that and then brought over their family. So I think it's okay to talk about that and it's okay to have a difference of opinion. But what I see online also is that there should be different financial limitations to the H-1Bs in America. That's probably a good way to start because there's no shortage of talent. in America. America is full of wonderful, smart, multilingual,
Hmm.
incredible innovators and entrepreneurs. And so there's a crisis of confidence maybe in America. Um, Americans have been t- crapped on by
Hmm.
successive American administrations, whether it's the Obama years and then the Biden years, and told that they're racist and terrible people and that the sins of their fathers hang on them in slavery. So, I mean, America is a great place. It is a wonderful nation, and we need a strong America to have a strong world, and we need America to have more confidence in itself, to reinvest in itself in order to be a leader for the free world. So I feel like there's a little bit of, we just finished celebrating Christmas and Hanukkah. They were coinciding this year, and I feel
Hmm.
like maybe that's a sign that there's a little light coming out of the darkness of these past years. And we see as the twilight of America was embodied and embodied by a decrepit and clearly demented Joe Biden on the world stage. And that's what America's enemies saw. And that's what the civilizational enemies saw, a feeble and decrepit America. And Donald Trump is robust, and he's a fighter, and he is America first. And that's going to be something that's good for the entire free world and for our civilization. We have a crisis in the West of confidence in our civilization, and we need to go back to some of the basics, I think.
Yeah, too many people here are ashamed of Western values, and
It's
the Western
terrible.
values are something to be proud of because it's what the rest of the world seeks.
Right.
That's why people are coming here because
Sure.
Western values work. And they give people
Yes.
a pursuit of happiness. Yeah, go for it. In
Right.
Canada, in the United States of America, this is where you're going to find it. In some of the more conservative areas of Europe, I hope the pendulum keeps swinging back in this direction because it's gotten so extreme right now,
Yeah.
and there is a
Yeah.
destruction. And I love how you painted Joe Biden is emblematic of what the perception now of the United States is. Donald Trump as
Hmm.
well, and I hope that shifts. I
Yeah.
want you to talk about this, the whole anchor baby thing, and
Mm.
the what they call birth tourism right now, because you
Right.
can come to a country, have a kid
Yeah.
in that country, and suddenly, guess what? You get to stay in that
That's
country
right.
because your child is now a U.S. citizen or a Canadian citizen, whichever country you hail from.
Yeah.
Should that be done away with? Do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, under certain circumstances, maybe there's exceptions, but in general, you shouldn't have any right to stay in a country because you're pregnant and you have a baby there. You should be able to have the baby safely. I think there should be some kind of a social safety network to make sure that a woman who is pregnant and giving birth is safe, and her baby too. But then you should be should be out the door and go back home and have a nice time
Hmm.
raising your kid. So it's a vast industry. In Canada, it's in British Columbia that I think is the biggest rate of birth tourism from China. From America, it's even a more extensive situation. But these are public policy sacred cows that nobody wants to touch. People are just like, la la la, can't hear you, ignoring it. But then you have a whole generation of people who are raised, undocumented, and an underground economy and an underground system of social services. And it's just a disaster. These are demographic ticking time bombs, and you can't just kick the can down the road and hope that these problems will sort themselves out. Like, Justin Trudeau said that the budget will sort itself out. Well, no, that doesn't happen. Reality is strong. Reality will come and bite you. And that's what we're feeling now, in North America, certainly, and in Western Europe. Complete
Yeah.
disaster, obviously, as well.
I used to tell my wife, yeah, our budget will sort itself out too. And it just never did it on its
Yeah,
own. It never
sure, for
worked. I
sure.
tried. I just
Yeah.
let it have its
Yeah, good
place.
luck
It'll
with
do it
that.
itself. And it just doesn't work that way at
Yeah,
all. Because
no.
we want to keep spending, don't we? That's just our human nature. We
Little
want more stuff.
discipline. Yeah.
So let me ask you this final thing, and then I'll let you
Mm.
go here. But, the downfall of Justin Trudeau. And I think there was a Trump effect here. And you could bring up the tariff issue. And I think I'm one of them
Right.
in the minority of conservatives who think that tariffs are actually the way he speaks of them is actually a good thing because he's a negotiator, right? So can you
Right,
explain,
for sure.
how that impacted Justin Trudeau, this Trump tariff threat, and how that exposed, Canada's economic realities?
Right. So the threat of a 25% tariff on the Canadian auto industry would be enough to actually crush the entire auto industry. That's it. That's a big stick. And Trump yielded it. And yes, it's probably just a starting negotiating point. But the other part of it is that he completely humiliated Justin Trudeau, but just by clicking out a few tweets on posts on X. So it was a worldwide drubbing at a time where he was already vulnerable and his popularity was down, and in an economic crisis situation where even his minister of finance was refusing to play games and give Canadians this ridiculous little free tax return of their own money. So it was a combination of things. But Donald Trump, yields a big stick, which is what you need for negotiations. But the consequence of a tariff of that nature on Canada, it is an existential threat to the Canadian auto industry. So he just, I think that Trudeau just folded in every sense of the word.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad you stepped down from the party, and I know that
Right.
that's going to be followed soon by him essentially being
They're going to
ousted as
have a
prime minister.
convention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think happens then? October, I know, is when the next election is, but I love your conservative candidate there, and I think he's got a really cool last name.
Oh,
Left,
Pierre Polyev. Yeah.
yeah, probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think he has a
He's
great
great.
shot at a majority, but
Mm,
there's just so much damage to fix, and Canadian demographics are really different. So we'll see. I'm sure he
yeah,
has a great grasp of economics. He's very pro America. He's pro Israel. He's pro Western civilization.
yeah.
He's a father. He's a husband. So lots of great things. He ticks a lot of boxes for a bit of a recovery. But there's some things that people have to understand, whether it's here or in America or in Western Europe, that are unfortunately irreversible. There are some
Mm.
things that are irreversible. There are policies that have damaged countries beyond repair. And there actually isn't a silver lining. Everybody wants the silver lining, but some of these situations are actually not fixable at this point, I
That's so
think.
sad. Yeah.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it'll take maybe decades to fix. Well, you can
We'll
tell a lot
see.
about a man and a lot about a country and how they view the state of Israel. And that's
Yes.
one of the reasons why I love him, and I love
Hmm.
what you do in your writing, and I
Thank you so
appreciate you
much.
coming on and what you put out
Appreciate
there
it.
for Brownstone Institute. And people should go check out your weekly Laura links on
Laura's links at
Laura's links.
steinonline.com. And I also am on X a lot. So it's just at Laura Rosen Cohen on X.
Awesome. Laura Rosen Cohen from
That's right.
Toronto, Canada, all the way
Yeah,
across the Detroit River, and then a few
that's
more
it.
miles after that, or kilometers. I'm sorry about
Yeah,
that.
it's
Appreciate you
okay.
so much. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Take care. Have a
All
good
right,
day.
take care. Yeah, she's fantastic. So I want to thank Laura for coming on the program. Listen, the temporary immigration programs, they really do undermine the domestic workers and these so-called temporary immigration programs like the H-1B in the U.S. and the TRP in Canada. They're anything but temporary. It's been borne out. We've seen it time and again. And they do displace qualified domestic workers. There's nothing racist about that. Don't let them put you in a corner like that because there's too many American workers who are saying, I'm losing my job. There are tens of thousands of qualified workers being laid off in this country in these like STEM type of fields in technology. And then they're bringing in these foreign workers to replace them, essentially, those jobs. And they suppress wages. They're paying like 30% less, I think, for these foreign born workers to come here on these temporary programs. And then they send a clear message to the middle class and families that, you're not the priority here. We're doing something different here, and it's not about you. That's essentially what they're saying. So the economic dependency that we're seeing with Canada, and I think it's good that Donald Trump saw this. Um, Canada is economically dependent on the United States, and it's weakening their sovereignty. And it's a lesson for the United States that we cannot continue on this path. That we are economically dependent on other nations as well, like on China. So Canada's like desperate reaction to Donald Trump's tariff threat exposed to everyone there that the painful truth is that they rely on foreign economies, which makes a nation vulnerable. And America should use its economic leverage, which Trump did here, to strengthen its industries at home, not prop up globalists who would sell out our sovereignty for short-term profit. That's what they're doing right now, and I think, their end game anyway. They would like to dismantle the United States and these Western societies because they deem them as evil for some reason. Birthright citizenship, It's controversial. I understand that. But it does encourage this abuse that is systemic within both of our countries, Canada and the United States. This anchor baby phenomenon, it's not just a loophole, it's a full fledged industry that drains public resources. People know they'll come over here while they're 8, 7, 8, 9 months pregnant, and then they'll give birth to their baby on purpose during that time frame so they can stay. And they're allowed to. It's legal. And why should taxpayers be footing the bill for someone who's exploiting these, I don't know, these laws that I guess are meant, the intention and maybe initially was to be compassionate. And, it's if you're born in this country, you're a citizen, but then they abuse that. And the whole family stays. And then if you separate them, you get blamed for, and it's a really convoluted, complex situation. But it does reward the abuse of our immigration laws. Why should that continue? That needs to be reformed. The temporary programs have become permanent problems. Milton Friedman said this. He pointed out that government programs that are labeled as temporary almost always become permanent fixtures. The H-1B and the TRP programs are glaring examples of that failure, and the costs are borne by the very citizens these governments are supposed to be protecting. So thanks to Laura Rosen Cohen for joining me. A great interview, and she's a great columnist up in Toronto, Canada. So thanks for your time. I want to go back to this live feed. This is live right now out in Los Angeles, where we're looking at some of the devastation of these fires that have come out. And this is a live feed, so we're looking at some of the stories that have been shot there. It's 6:43 in the morning out in Los Angeles, so presumably the sun is just coming up here. And you can see a reporter walking through the destruction of this neighborhood. I've been on many scenes just like that when I was a reporter out in California, after these fires would roar through Southern California in particular. And you see the devastation. You don't think that this could actually happen, but when you see it with your own eyes, I've carried these melted engine blocks in my hand that are just, it's almost like a work of art. I mean, how does the heat is so intense that it melts steel, and these cars become melted down, and the only thing that's left in a lot of these places are the chimneys and the chimney stacks that remain. Everything else often is gone, but it's just a horrific situation out there. So I want to play something here. This was because the world is watching this, and there's the Australian network. It's ABC in Australia. It's not the ABC. It's not connected to the American version of ABC. This is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And they did a story on this, and I want to play that for you right now.
A hellscape to rival anything Hollywood could produce. Wildfires bigger and wilder than any in living memory. Los Angeles is under siege.
Look how close the freaking fire is, but they haven't told us to evacuate.
51-year-old Nadia Pavia live-streamed the fire that may have claimed her Pasadena home.
I'm from Victoria, Australia, and I just don't think that I want to take that risk because I know what happened in that fire. I think it was 2009.
At 10:30 p.m, she decided it was time to grab the cat and head to a hotel.
I'm in tears right now. I'm just watching the fires getting closer and closer to where I live. I don't know if the house is on fire.
And it's just like, imagine suburbs in Melbourne, like Toorak being on fire, and then say Glenroy being on fire, and they're all on fire at the same time. It's people. We're all shell shocked. It's just I just couldn't believe the places so close that were just being burnt down. Even though I know that all the fires are close, I'm still hoping, oh, maybe our house is going to be okay. I don't think I'm going to comprehend it until I see that it's burnt and that everything's gone.
A new blaze is roaring through Hollywood Hills.
This is right near the Hollywood sign.
Threatening thousands of homes and buildings, including iconic landmarks like the Hollywood Bowl and the Walk of Fame. This is an unseasonal midwinter disaster, fueled by powerful hurricane-force gusts known as the Santa Ana winds. Locals call them the devil winds, and this, the city of angels, now a living hell.
Grab this pole. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to get your walker done.
More than 100,000 Californians have been told to evacuate.
Come on, Dad. Turn around. We got this. Keep walking down the hill.
Congestion and confusion saw many abandoning homes and cars.
I tell you, I've been here 47 years. I grew up on this block. I saw the other altitude fires, and it was nothing like this. Nothing like this.
The firefight's been long and fraught. An overwhelming task undermined by limited resources.
And look, here comes the fire department right now. We're also seeing other fires popping up at other homes down the street. Look at that. The fire department is so overwhelmed, they just drove right by while this home is engulfed in flames.
Some suburbs have run dry.
Fire hydrants are empty. Firefighters are doing everything they can, but we need to do things more proactively before.
Tonight, only one of the fires burning across LA is contained.
The entire neighborhood is burnt down, but somehow my house does not even have a scratch. There's no fire damage. I went in, but the house next to mine is still on fire. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's terrifying. You're terrified. You just assume you're about to lose everything. I mean, that's all you can think about.
Quite bizarre because there's just plumes of smoke. There's 4 or 5 active fires all around us, to the south, to the east, to the northwest, to the north.
Photographer Laura Johansson has raised her family in LA. As the fires get closer, they've been told to be ready to leave.
Everything's covered in ash out here. The air quality is insane. We've been without power for about 20 hours, and we've got our bags packed, everything's in the car.
Where the fire has been extinguished, the aftermath is unfathomable. From the hills to the coast.
How much would you say that you've lost? Everything. I got my car, whatever's in my car. So, don't know.
This was the Pacific Coast Highway at Malibu, beachfront mansions side by side. This is the highway today.
It's a lot. It's a lot, but, you know, nature wins. And I just saw a lot of friends' homes go down.
Sydney man Neil Aegis lives near Pacific Palisades.
Damn.
This is the view of the streets around his home.
Oh my God.
It's absolutely devastating to see entire neighborhoods be burnt down to the dust. It really looks like an apocalyptic scene. I've never seen anything like it before. It's absolutely devastating, and everyone's just praying that, you know, this comes to an end soon.
Local news reporters were often the first to see it up close.
I grew up in that community. My parents still live in that community. I cannot explain the level of devastation that I just saw. I'm not over-exaggerating. It feels like 50 to 75% of Pacific Palisades is gone.
And that reporter might be correct. Now, this is a live picture right now in Los Angeles. We have one of the affiliates out there, the stations, has a chopper up in the air. So we're watching this fire continue to burn, and it's pretty horrendous. And I think that reporter is correct. It's probably about 75% of Pacific Palisades is probably gone. And I've been with many reporters out on the scene. I've seen reporters that colleagues of mine who were reporting in the front yard of their own home as it was burning down besides them or in back of them. So, yeah, that's our live feed out there. This Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, in the heart of Hollywood, California. And the news anchor there showing the 5 different fires out there. There are at least 5 people who have been killed. Let's take some of the video that we have as well. It's pretty horrendous. So the Palisades fire alone has incinerated more than 1,000 homes. As the firefighters are battling the flames without sufficient water because of years of mismanagement and negligence in bad priorities. I'll say that. So President-elect Donald Trump, he came out and he criticized Governor Gavin Newsom's policies, citing the prioritization of a functionally extinct smelt over Southern California's water needs. It's the smelt fish. You should look into this if you haven't, but basically they have prioritized this smelt for years now, diverting fresh water from communities in need and just putting it out into the ocean, wasting it from the Sierra Nevadas, the ice melt and whatnot, and they just send it out to the ocean because they're trying to protect this smelt fish that is functionally extinct. So Donald Trump accused Newsom of derailing the federal efforts to redirect water to the south from those Northern California mountains, and completely ignoring the fire risk mitigation efforts that were commonplace up until about 15 years ago. Things like controlled burns and clearing out the brush in these forests and these canyons and around homes. They stopped doing that. And Mayor Karen Bass, she's the Los Angeles mayor, she cut more than $17 million from the fire department's budget in Los Angeles alone. And there's been a lot of criticism against her because she was in Ghana, in Africa, as the disaster was unfolding here. I don't criticize her for being there. But the response she gave when she came back, she did come back, I think, admittedly, pretty quickly from there. But she would not answer the tough questions, and they don't feel like they need to out in California, because much of the media out there in Los Angeles included, Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Diego, they're very much in the pocket of the Democratic politicians out there. So they don't normally ask them difficult questions, but they were asked, she was being asked, like, why did you cut the budget in Los Angeles when you know this is a huge fire-prone area? Why did you do that? Why are you mismanaging this? Do you blame Gavin Newsom at all? Where were you? Why were you in Africa? Why did it take you so long to come back here? Those kinds of questions she refused to respond. So critics are blasting her for ignoring the warnings. I guess there was warnings ahead of time that the Santa Ana winds were going to blow through that region. And now residents out there, including celebrities, are calling her to resign. The LA's utility leadership, which has been plagued by corruption and resignations throughout the utility industry in California, they also failed to maintain their water reserves, which are critical for these types of firefights. So there's a guy named Rick Caruso. He's the former utility commissioner. He condemned the city's infrastructure failures. He says, listen, this should never have happened. Fire hydrants ran dry within hours of this firefight. Can you imagine that? The fire hydrants, which are supposed to depend on, are dry. And firefighters are helpless in this as Pacific Palisades burned down to the ground. Look at that. They couldn't fight the fires because there's no water to do so. And then you got neighboring areas like Pasadena, which is very dry out, and it's further inland from Los Angeles, so it gets very dry out there. They were facing similar types of chaotic scenes out there, residents being forced to fight flames with shovels. You pay all these taxes for emergency preparedness, and the resources aren't available. So the crisis here underscores this whole systemic failure in California's leadership, this mismanagement and these misplaced priorities, leaving citizens vulnerable to really these preventable disasters. And again, I'll say it many times over, that this is not a climate change caused disaster. This is complete mismanagement. And I would even make the case, because I believe this is true, that a lot of this has to do with the fact that they want this narrative to say, listen, we've never seen fires like this because the planet is dying. So we need to, cut the carbon dioxide emissions completely. We need to be carbon neutral or carbon zero by 2040, whatever. That's not the issue here. You've mismanaged a known risk, which has been a known risk for centuries in California. So that's that. Pray for them. This is a very horrific situation. You look at the human toll here. It is very rough to lose your home like this. And most people in Los Angeles are not the wealthy celebrities. Yeah, you've seen the pictures of the celebrity homes being burned to the ground, but it is a very difficult place to live for a lot of vulnerable people out there who are very much trying to make ends meet, working 2 and 3 jobs. I've got family out there. One of my sons works 2 jobs to make ends meet out in California. So, and then thankfully, he's fine. But you got this going on, and who knows for how long that'll be the case. All right. We have some comments and questions. Let's bring them up. Cameron Harris is watching them. Let's bring them up one by one here. We're going to start off. This is a 2-part comment that Cameron says. Matt says, the fires are paving the way for redevelopment and higher taxes as planned. That's a very good pickup on that, Matt, because there is something called Proposition 13 from the 1970s. I'll continue your comment, then I'll discuss this. Planned because the LA Fire Department budget was cut. The water reservoirs were not built. The fire hydrants are not working. The citizens voted for these government officials. Yeah, you're right, Matt. They did vote for them. And a lot of the people who live in California are very liberal, and they'll vote Democrat no matter what, no matter crazy ideas they come up with. Karen Bass is a horrible mayor of Los Angeles, and I wish he wasn't, because it's a city that's been on the downslope, I think, for many years now, and it's such a beautiful part of the country. But the city of Los Angeles is mismanaged, has been for a long time, and it's a very expensive place to live. But there was something called Proposition 13 in the 1970s that what that did is that allowed the property taxes, which I thought was great, actually. My mother didn't like it because I grew up in a Democratic household. She wanted more taxes. So the argument was this will help our schools. So there's always the educational bent on this. That's why they instituted a lottery, but schools kept getting worse no matter how much money was thrown at them. So Proposition 13 prevented the property taxes from going up at the whim of a liberal politician who wanted to raise taxes. There was a cap, and I think it was at 1% or something of that nature. I can't remember now. But what that has done is that has prevented these greedy California politicians from getting their hands on more and more money. I mean, that's one of the good things about California was Proposition 13. But there's all these loopholes. So what happens, though, if you sell your house and there's a new owner of that house that comes in 2024, those property taxes go way up, because now instead of being grandfathered to that 1% cap, you start now with a new baseline of the current value of that home. It's assessed now. A home in the 1970s, you can buy it for $30,000. Now that same home in California could be $4 or $5 million. That's true. The house I grew up in, I think my parents bought it for $40,000. It's now like a $2.4 million house. It's a tract home. And so, but it's California, so they think it's worth it. This is worth that much money. It's not, but anyway, so I think you're right. You're onto something, Matt, there. Thanks for that, and I hope that explanation I made sense. Let's bring up another comment here. Charles Beatty. Hey, Charles, good to see you. It is telling liberal celebrities who are ones to raise money for liberal politicians who enacted liberal policies are the first to call out politics they've helped come to pass only when it's a da-da-da-da-da-da. I think he's going to say, I'm going to presume that only when it affects them. Yeah, you're right. What they don't realize, I think, is that all these policies affect them. But the celebrities and the very wealthy are a bit immune. They're kind of still in that bubble because they don't see a lot of these policies really affecting them, like higher grocery prices. But when your house burns down, yeah, you kind of feel that one, don't you? Charles, thanks so much. Let's bring up another one here. It's Henry Sakalian. Hey, good morning, Tom. Good morning, Harry. Regarding the unbridled immigration problem, there is still not enough victims to make the required changes. By the time we have enough victims, it will be too late. Thanks, Harry Sakalian. Harry, I see what you're saying there. I think there's not enough perceived victims. There are enough victims right now. That was one of the reasons I left California 12 years ago, whenever it was, that I left. It was because of the ramifications of really bad immigration policies and how that affects the ordinary citizens becomes unsustainable to live out there. So you're right. There needs to be better reporting on the true victims of illegal immigration. Thanks so much, Harry. Good to see you. Let's get another one here. This will be our fourth one, right? Taz is back. Hi, Taz. How are you? Good to see you, buddy. Governor Whitmore is cut from the same cloth as Justin Trudeau. You're correct. She is. Never forget her response to COVID and her poor, reckless decisions, such as banning the selling of paint and seeds to the public. She is the same. They want us to forget what she did. They said you should forget it. That's not kind to look back on But what she revealed about herself was her authoritarian nature during COVID. And it's the same as Justin Trudeau. It's the same as Gavin Newsom. It's the same as J.D. Pritzker in Illinois. They're all government globalists and World Economic Forum types. And there's a lot of people beneath her who are cut from the same cloth as well. Thanks so much. Let's bring up another comment. One more here. Vaughn Westerby. Hi, Vaughn. Good to see you. The government you elect is the government you deserve. Thomas Jefferson. That's the truth. And sometimes we don't realize the mistakes we made until it's too late. And that, my friend, is why the pendulum is swinging back, because we are now feeling the consequences of very bad voting decisions in 2020, 2012, 2008. If you know what I'm saying here. All right, thanks so much for your comments. Thanks for your participation. We'll be back here tomorrow. A great show again, 9 a.m. Eastern, right here. Tom Jordan Live on Facebook, on X, on YouTube, on Apple Podcast, and on Spotify. God bless you. We'll see you back here tomorrow.